Greetings and welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. Happy New Year. This is December 31st, 2024. Very glad to be here with you. You will notice I've got a lot of reflection in my eyeglasses. You can see that. I'll just tell you, I recently had cataract surgery in both of my eyes. You may not be aware, my eyesight was really bad, really very, very terrible. So the cataract surgery went well. It's not perfect. I still need corrective lenses. These are cheap little reader glasses that are very useful for my purposes right here. In a very short period of time, I expect to have a nice new prescription for actual glasses that will be non-reflective and will be kind of you won't be able to see my reflection. So that's what's going on there. I'm very, very happy that I can see so much better. Like those of you who've had cataract surgery, you know what I'm talking about. The light, the colors, it's like, wow, this is what the world used to look like. And I remember from olden times, and now I can experience that again. So that's all wonderful. So on to the topic of the video. We're finishing up 2024, and I do think it's a very appropriate time to review just some of the really significant stories pertaining to UFOs or UAP of 2024. I personally think this has been a banner year in terms of significance for a lot of reasons. It's easy if you've been in this field a long time, you want to get jaded. It's very easy to get jaded over everything, call everything a nothing burger, or that was overrated. Nothing important ever happens. I would disagree when reviewing this last year. And in fact, I would go further and say that over the last many years, since really 2017, we have been seeing a very high-paced amount of information coming to us from the classified world, from people who had worked within that world. It's filled with arguments and disagreements and a lot of skepticism and all of that. But you cannot deny that it's been an interesting ride, and a lot of claims are coming out. They continue to come out. 2024 is definitely no exception. So I want to go through what I think are the most important stories of the year. And then I want to finish this video with what I think is perhaps the most important hidden UFO or UAP story of the year, and we'll get to that. But as far as some of the leading headline stories of 2024, I think without a doubt we're looking at the mystery drones as the number one. The Congressional Hearing, which was just a month and a half ago, was definitely very significant. The AARO Report, which came on the heels of that. The classified briefing, even though that's related to the current story of mystery drones, the fact that there was a classified briefing that we learned about essentially immediately, I consider to be kind of significant. But as far as the mystery drones, let me just start and just dive in a little bit on that, even though we have been hearing a lot about it for sure. But there's a lot of reasons this is a super important story, and probably the most important UFO or UAP story of the year. Even if, I don't even know if these things are genuine classical UFOs or not. There are mysterious things about them. But a couple of things that we just want to keep in mind. One is the scale and duration of this wave or flap of sightings. UFO researchers love to use the word flap or wave when they describe concentrated periods of sightings within a specific geographic region that go on for a little while. I call that a flap, or when it gets really big, it's a wave. Whatever. This is a flap or it's a wave, who knows? But this has been going for quite a while now, a couple of months, and it doesn't show signs of abating just yet. We've had thousands of reports from all kinds of witnesses in multiple states, not just New Jersey. So we're talking about a large-scale phenomenon. So there's that. There's the proximity to various sensitive or military types of sites. So you've had a lot of them by military installations and nuclear facilities, other critical infrastructure. So that's got the whole national security dimension. And then you've got, of course, the lack of explanations. No one seems to be able to give a definitive answer. Everyone's got an opinion. Even federal agencies, they're just whether it's FBI or DHS or the Pentagon or whomever, they can't give anything other than, well, we think it's just a lot of commercial drone activity, nothing to get excited about here. No one believes that. I doubt that they believe that as well. And the fact is that everyone's got a theory, but no one really has got a theory that everyone can seem to agree on, That's the thing about that. And then, of course, there's the fact that these drones are not normal. They have advanced capabilities, if nothing else. They've got advanced, like hovering for extended periods of time, and they're able to evade detection. At least many times they seem to be able to do that. They can go dark. We've heard that phrase. They don't act like ordinary drones or even military drones. There's been a lot of advances and that continue to be made in drone technology, so we cannot rule anything out, obviously. But nonetheless, I would say that these drones seem very, very capable and sophisticated. And then the fact that the government response has just been so very dissatisfactory, non-credible, I think, from a lot of people's point of view. But on top of that, they've actually been quite active. The FAA has issued flight restrictions. It has prompted the classified briefing to Congress that I'll talk about in a minute. The deployment of all types of advanced detection technologies and systems. So you can tell like they are considering this whole thing quite serious as well. And then the fact that you've got a wide public interest in this, to an extent that hasn't really been the case with an extended UFO flap in probably more than 20 years, maybe more than 30, 40 years. If you really think about this, go back. Back in earlier decades, when there was a series of many, many UFO sightings, they would get newspaper and media attention. This has not happened for a long time. In fact, I think you could say it really hasn't happened for most of the 21st century. I was thinking back and, a little over 20 years ago in Argentina, there was a whole wave of UFO sightings with cattle mutilations, and that was an extended thing that got some attention. A couple of years after that in British Columbia, I remember following a wave of UFO sightings that were going on there, getting kind of local reportage, but neither of those got really massive U.S. Western national attention like these mystery drones are getting. So I think that's unique. We've had a lot of UFO sightings over the last couple of decades, for sure, but not as part of this extended wave of sightings. So I think that really does make this also kind of a standout. And then, of course, you've got the potential implications of it all. What are these things? Are they really conventional drones? They don't quite seem like it to me. Not entirely. If they're not conventional drones, are we talking about especially advanced technology that needs a better explanation than what we're getting, And could that indicate genuine UAP or UFO? And the reason I'm going to bring that up here because if you look at the history of UFOs, you will recognize that, as I was just saying, there have been a number of these flaps that have occurred in the past. And the thing about all of them is that really none of them have a genuine explanation to this day. I'll give you one example. Back in 1975, one of my favorite ones to study, you had a series of incursions over U.S. military bases. So back then, just as now. So back then, they were over from Maine, Loring Air Force Base, which was operational back then, right along the coast. A couple of nights, an object came in, hovered low over the base, right where they stored nuclear weapons. Just so happens. No explanation for this. This thing was incredible, brazen. They could do nothing about it. Over at Wurtsmith Air Force Base in Michigan, same kind of thing happening. Low, we're talking late October, early November 1975. Object comes in, it's hanging out, ultra stealthy, ultra quiet, super quiet. And then an aircraft comes in, just comes in for landing, and is vectored in to chase this thing. They go down Lake Michigan on a chase, and this object is just playing games with them. Sometimes it seems to split into two, sometimes it doesn't. At one point, it shot away at more than 1,000 miles per hour. Keep in mind, that same thing had been hovering, silent, motionless over the base just like a half hour earlier. So what was that? And then over at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, less than a week later, and a number of other places as well. So this was a wave of sightings in 1975 that we do not have an explanation for to this day. It's been almost 50 years since that one happened. If I were to make a prediction on the mystery drones, I would hazard to say it will probably resolve itself in just the way that all the others have resolved themselves. That is, not resolving itself at all. It'll just end, and we will not have probably a valid explanation as to what the hell had just been going on. That's what I think. I don't think we're going to get an answer. The folks who are looking at this, who do not really have much background or history in the UFO phenomenon, I think they're underestimating our ability to get to the bottom of this. That's what I'm going to say there. So moving on, let's talk about the congressional hearing. That's another major story of 2024. I'm really constantly surprised when I hear people say, well, there was really nothing to this hearing, not a big deal. I totally disagree. So this was November 13th of this year, 2024, just a month and a half ago. You had the House Oversight Committee. This is a highly anticipated hearing on UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena is how we're calling it now. So it featured 4 witnesses. You had a retired Rear Admiral of the Navy, Tim Gallaudet. He's on the left there. Former defense official Lou Elizondo, journalist Michael Schellenberger, and a former NASA official named Michael Gold. There was a lot of that was not all that amazing and not all that groundbreaking. But then there were other things that really were quite significant about this hearing. And, let's just keep some of this in mind. You had Admiral Gallaudet saying that the UAPs are real. So you have a Navy admiral telling Congress this is real. I mean, that by itself is a nice public statement to make, in my opinion. But he also said that they have been interacting with U.S. military assets, including naval operations. And I thought he made a very good call for greater transparency by the U.S. government on this whole matter. Luis Elizondo, I think, had some of the most powerful things to say, like Gallaudet saying UAP are real. He said the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies. Now, Lou Elizondo has been saying this for a while. He said it very, very deliberately and very directly at this congressional hearing. I think that was quite significant. He also said a number of U.S. adversaries are in possession of this as well, inferring, I suppose, Russia, perhaps China, maybe other nations as well. And what he really said was that this was like a multi-decade secret arms race involving UAP tech. And that's a significant thing to say. You can agree or disagree with it, but the fact that you have a government official telling members of Congress that this is the case, I think is a quite significant thing to say. You had Michael Schellenberger. He, of course, brings forth the information on this alleged classified program called Immaculate Constellation. Lots of argument about that. I did a video on it when it came out. I think it's quite interesting. I can't say I know for a fact that this was the real deal, but I would not rule it out. I think that it requires more investigation, for sure. But when you've got people out there saying this is just a lot of hot air, it's a lot of make-believe, let's just hold off on that. I think I would not be so hasty. That's just my own opinion. So I think all of that was quite interesting. You had Elizondo, I think Gallaudet, and Schellenberger were talking about the existence of special access programs related to this subject that have been kept hidden from Congress and the public, obviously. lots of indications that these UAP are representative of non-human intelligence. No one really wanted to take that major step and say definitely it is. Perhaps Lou Elizondo came kind of closest to that, but Schellenberger would not. I think Gallaudet was also pretty cautious about that as well. They were really talking about a lot of concerns about national security, airspace safety, and the like. I think the most significant part of this hearing, in my opinion, this is what I thought was quite major, was the fact that one member of Congress, Representative Burleson of Missouri, asked Lou Elizondo about an article by my friend Christopher Sharp that had just come out shortly before that, which talked about a failed attempt of a UAP transfer of technology from Lockheed Martin to Bigelow Aerospace. This is back in the AWSAP days, so assuming 2007, 2008, 2009, thereabouts, that failed twice. So that the idea is that Bigelow Aerospace was attempting to acquire, how do you put this, alien technology from Lockheed Martin, and that it was stopped twice by a senior CIA executive. CIA got involved. The executive was named Glenn Gaffney. And this is an extraordinary thing. And Burleson asked Elizondo about this in the hearing. For no other reason, that made this hearing quite significant, in my opinion. And Elizondo affirmed it, by the way. If you were listening, read the transcript. He did not deny it. He said, yes, it was stopped. He didn't get into all of the details by any means, but he certainly affirmed it. I don't think there's any denying that. So you can say, well, that's a lot of BS as well, but this is information that is out there and that demands, in my opinion, ongoing follow-up by, everyone, by the public, by investigators, by journalists who think that they're doing their job. This is very significant, and really makes you wonder about what was the purpose of AWSAP to begin with. Was this the fundamental purpose to segue Lockheed's technology? And it also makes you wonder, why would Lockheed want to get rid of their UFO tech? I'd always assumed for years and years that if a private contractor has got UFO-related technology, why would they ever want to give it up? But maybe there are reasons they would want to give it up. Maybe they've studied everything they can about it. Maybe it's becoming a liability for them. Maybe they don't know what to do with it any longer. It's becoming a problem, a hot potato. Who knows? And so I think all of that's very interesting. And this came out as a result of the congressional hearing, which I consider to be a very profound event, and certainly significant. So then right on the heels of that, we get the AARO Report. That's the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And AARO really is very much like our modern iteration of Project Blue Book. We've got it back. Blue Book is back, baby. So just a few days after the hearing, Dr. John Kozlowski, the new director of AARO, gave or presented, I guess you could say, a report to the Senate and gave their findings on UAP. And there's a lot of interesting things in there. AARO received 757 new UAP reports, he said, between May 1st, 2023 and June 1st, 2024. So that's a lot of reports. That brought their total number of reports to, I think he said, over 1,600. So they're developing their own kind of large database. He had a lot of other things that he talked about. He basically said, look, most of these reports that we get have mundane explanations: balloons, birds, drones, satellites, conventional aircraft, what have you. He said 900 of the 1,600 reports lacked sufficient data for a meaningful analysis to be done about them. But he said they're in an active archive for potential future investigation, which means there will be no investigation. They're not; those are just dead cases, very likely, I would say. He said, a very small percentage of these cases are truly anomalous. He says, and this is really a great little bit of wordsmithing here. So there are only a very small percentage of cases are truly anomalous, but they require such a significant amount of time and resources to investigate. So he kind of made it seem like we're not going to investigate those either. It's a little bit too much work. We're going to take a hard pass. That's how I interpret it. Maybe you have a different way of reading that. And then, of course, the big thing that he said, the big reveal, was that AARO, with all of their information, had no verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial technology, extraterrestrial beings, or anything related to that whole business of UFOs being ET. Now, what was interesting to me is what was absent from the AARO report, which was pretty much everything of interest. No talk of crash retrievals. That doesn't exist, despite all of the claims that we have been hearing from people like Elizondo, from people like David Grush, from people like Christopher Melon, and many others now, all supporting decades worth of serious UFO research that also has made this claim of UFO crash retrievals. None of that was in the AARO report. None of it was discussed whatsoever. No talk of even of the U.S. government's longstanding interest of the UFO or UAP phenomenon. That's just out. It's like they live in a different reality, a different universe. It's an alternate reality that belongs only to the people in AARO. And then, again, the top story is a classified UAP drone briefing. This is not as significant as those other three, but it's kind of interesting. I mean, the fact that we've had these mystery drones kind of dominating, relatively speaking, for a UFO story. They've been really quite strong over the last couple of months. The fact that they warranted and got a classified briefing. Not only that, but the fact that we learned that there was a classified briefing, I think on the same day that it was heard, or the following day at the latest. I think that's kind of significant. Not that we learned anything about what was said in that briefing. We did not. We've got no information whatsoever. The Pentagon spokesman, General Pat Ryder, did talk about this, and he didn't really say anything about what was involved in the briefing. He just, did the same old kind of refrain, which is that, well, none of these really seem to affect national security. I'm like, are you kidding me? No one believes that, General Ryder. You're talking to yourself and you're talking to your colleagues. No one else believes it at all. So that's that. And then there's a couple of other, before I get to my personal vote for the top hidden UAP story of the year, there were a couple of others that were, I think, kind of interesting and noteworthy from my point of view. I'll just go over these three really quickly. First, Japan. This is back in June. If you recall this, they announced their own UAP group. This is not really a huge thing, but the fact was, you did have Japanese lawmakers. They announced that they were forming a group within the country's parliament. They're called the Diet, to investigate UAP. Pretty much modeled on the AARO organization that we have here in the U.S. Their group, I think, had something like, has 80 members involved. They have a lot of former defense ministers and senior politicos that are involved in all of that. They're really looking at this not as an ET thing, not as an anomalous thing in any way. They are looking at it, at least from their statements, strictly speaking, as national security, enemy drones, this type of thing. So they're going all national security, and there is not a single indication that I could see that the Japanese were interested in actually studying this scientifically as something anomalous. So there's that. But the fact that they did announce that they were doing it, I thought, kind of interesting. The Harvard story was a little more interesting, a little more fun. You have three researchers, Tim Lomas, Brendan Case of Harvard University, along with Michael Masters from Montana Tech of the University of Montana. did a joint paper, and it was called the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis, with a very long subtitle. And that was kind of fun, kind of interesting. It came out earlier this year, where they're exploring the possibility of aliens or an advanced non-human intelligences living on Earth, maybe on the moon, or even walking among us disguised as humans. I thought it was quite fascinating, the fact that you've got these researchers, two of them at Harvard. Harvard has a program called the Human Flourishing Program. I had not heard of that as part of that, but essentially suggesting that, there's a lot of different possibilities of what these UAP or UFOs are. Are they an ancient, advanced human civilization that has survived in secret? One possibility. Are they a non-human society, like intelligent dinosaurs that never went extinct, or ape-like hominids that evolved independently and somehow secretly from our own society? I consider that a long shot at best, but anyway, they put that out there. And extraterrestrials, okay, time travelers, sure, or even magical beings like fairies or folklore creatures and things like that. So they kind of put that all out there. Thank you, Harvard. I mean, it didn't really get too much attention, but I thought it was at least somewhat interesting. And then you have the Donald Trump story. I think this is quite interesting, actually, and this one could be quite significant even for the coming year. So Trump has been reelected, but before he was reelected, he did a couple of podcasts. One was with Joe Rogan, one was with Lex Friedman. And in both of those, both very interesting podcasts, frankly, if you didn't check them out. So he basically repeatedly committed in various statements to both of those gentlemen greater transparency on the UFO or UAP issue if he was reelected. With Rogan, he actually said, look, I've been told a lot about UAPs that has not been revealed to the public. With Lex Friedman, he was kind of similar. He said, I'm willing to push the Pentagon for greater transparency and for the release of additional UFO or UAP footage. He did confirm that he was briefed on the subject when he was president, although he was very cautious about what he would disclose to the public. He said he had access to UFO files. I don't know how much he read them, and that he had meetings in the White House on the subject. So all of that, I think, is interesting. And when you really think about with Trump, this really did not get a lot of attention. And, go back almost 50 years. Jimmy Carter just passed away the other day. And when Jimmy Carter was running for the White House in the year 1976, it was really a huge deal at the time that this presidential candidate admitted that he had had a UFO sighting when he had been governor of Georgia a few years earlier. That was huge. He's like, oh my God, he admitted it. Yeah, he did admit it, and it was very big. And then Carter also said back then, because a lot of people asked him about this, he said, well, if I am elected president, then I will do everything I can to release the Project Blue Book files, which were then classified, actually. And they were made public. And then he said, I would, whatever I'm able to do to put, relevant UFO information out there that doesn't affect national security, I will do so. And that made a huge splash within the UFO community back then. It was actually very, very big. But I would say that what Trump has said here objectively to Rogan and to Friedman and these guys, I think is actually quite a lot bigger. He admitted to far more than even what Jimmy Carter, even when Carter's post-presidency, he really never went very far with what he knew about the subject. Although he did say something to his friend, the actress Shirley MacLaine, who did talk about that on places like on other news programs. So, all right. So let me get to the big story that I think personally is worth our attention here, because I think when you take, there's a few different things that happen, and when you take them all as a unit, it's actually quite significant. So you have revelations from David Grush, from, how does this work here, to Christopher Melon, and then Lou Elizondo. I think, there's Lou. So I want to talk about each one of these in their turn. And I do think that they amount to a very, very significant combined sort of revelation that we really need to not forget as far as the legacy of 2024. So we'll start with David Grush. This was close to a year ago, I think in the very beginning of January, it seems. David Grush was at I guess you could say, a secret meeting in New York City. A lot of Wall Street executives, intelligence officials, I think about 60 people supposedly attended this. And Grush shared, we are told, details about a 40-foot flying saucer that was, when you entered it, was the size of a football field. That's what he said. Suggesting that it could manipulate space and time. And indeed, if you've got an object that looks like it's 40 feet in diameter and you go inside and it's the size of a football field, some kind of manipulation is going on there. And let me just add that I'm not saying this is absolutely true, but I will say, just for the sake of fairness, there have been many claims throughout the long history of let's say, alleged abductions and alleged interactions with beings aboard craft of this type of thing. This is not a new development. This is something that you will come across many times if you go through the literature and the research on this. Is it true? I couldn't tell you. I don't know. But should you just dismiss it out of hand because it seems like a crazy story? I wouldn't do that. First of all, the UFO subject in general is not supposed to exist at all. It doesn't make any sense. UFOs don't make sense. Let's just be fair about that. But yet, here they are. They have been here. They don't seem to care whether or not we think they make sense. So when you get a gentleman like David Grush, who, by the way, has had very high-level security clearances and spoke to Congress himself back in 2023. We all remember that. If nothing else, a guy who's clearly highly intelligent. Look, let's just listen to what he has to say. And if you don't like what he has to say, go debate with him, go argue with him. But the fact that he made this statement, I think, is quite significant. He went on. He just said that it was believed to have to be able to create energy or use energy or create energy at more than a terawatt. So is that a trillion watts? I think. Is that a trillion watts? Whatever. It's enough to power 70,000 homes for a year. That's supposedly what it can do. So a lot of energy on this thing. And then he said he cited anonymous sources who claimed to have worked on this particular craft. So there apparently, according to David Grush, is a 40-foot craft that is as big as a football field when you go in, and that can use or create whatever an unbelievable amount of energy. So that's Grush. I remember there were a couple of people who criticized him just for the fact that he's doing a secret meeting with a bunch of hedge fund guys trying to make money. Well, sure, you can criticize that all you want, but the fact is, I'm more interested in the information than the motives. It is interesting, though, that this was a Wall Street meeting and that you did have money managers involved in this. It does show that the UFO UAP subject matters from a financial point of view, at least to some people. And you got to ask yourself, why is that. Let me talk about Chris Mellon's revelation, which I think was very significant indeed. So this came out last August. Chris Melon, of course, is a former Pentagon official, high level. He has been instrumental over these past 7+ years now in getting the UFO subject out into the public conversation. He's probably more instrumental than any other single person, in my opinion. So last August, he released a redacted document from a Signal conversation, Signal, the phone app, that he had with a unnamed but senior U.S. government official, claiming that they were dealing with a recovered UAP or flying saucer that crashed in Kingman, Arizona. He says in the 1950s. That would be the 1953 Kingman, Arizona event that researchers have been talking about since the 1970s. We've known about this. This is very significant, in my opinion. There's a lot of major statements, and Melon just put it right out there. Quote, "We are dealing with the recovered UAP that landed in Kingman, Arizona in the 50s. Document also had statements like they know who recovered or who recovers landed or crashed UFOs or UAPs, under what authorities. There's a still highly classified memo by a secretary of the U.S. Air Force in the 1950s that is still in effect to maintain the cover on this whole subject. They know who is the Air Force gatekeeper on this subject. The official also stated to Melon that people will be slack-jawed if they found out what we know. It's just incredible stuff. And the amount of news follow-up on this was, I think, quite minimal, quite shocking. Here you have a high-level defense official putting this out there. A couple of years ago when the Davis-Wilson notes were leaked back in 2019, that was a very, very big thing. I consider this leak to be along the same lines. It's not as involved as the Davis-Wilson notes, but it is still significant. It's a private conversation between two very prominent individuals that talks about the reality of a clandestine program to hide flying saucers from the public. How else do you want to put it? And I think this was Mellon's take on it. I think he's using this information to support his argument that that at least the allegations of these acquired craft deserve to be studied and discussed to a much greater degree than they are in our society. I think that's really his main point. And then let me get to Luis Elizondo, who rounds this off. These three individuals with their revelations of the last year. Lou, of course, did a book earlier this year. I reviewed that book. It's one of my earlier videos called Imminent. I think, again, you had people saying, there was nothing new in this book. My answer is, did you even read the book? Because if you read the book, there is no way that you can say there was nothing new or interesting in it. That's not a legitimate position, in my opinion. A lot of lazy people who I think pretended to read it and say, there's just the same old. No, it isn't. It isn't. So he had information in there. And then, of course, what Lou had to say to Congress, which I kind of alluded to earlier, was also quite significant. But, in Imminent, he's talking about he's making very powerful statements. It's a decades-long UFO crash retrieval program. He's talked about that. It's been operating super secret. That's real. He claimed that over the years, technology and biological remains of non-human origin have been retrieved from these crashes. He made one statement that humanity is, in fact, not the only intelligent life in the universe and not the alpha species. We're not on top. He's been saying things like this, actually for quite a few years, but he made that statement in his book. And he was very explicit about the fact that the government's in possession of advanced tech made off-world by non-human intelligence, by aliens, essentially. You had a couple of other things like this that were, I think, quite significant. So I think when you take Grush, Melon, and Elizondo together in 2024, ask yourself, you go back through the history of the UFO subject. When have you had three former government officials, all of them, making such public statements as these on this level with this amount of detail? I don't think we've had it. I don't think that has been the case. So 2024, on that basis alone, I think was quite significant. Now, where we're going to go with all this in the future, what will 2025 bring to us? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but if I'm just looking at the trend, I've got to think that 2025 will probably be as active, if not more active, than 2024 was. And I say this because we seem to be in an era where things are just speeding up a little more and a little more each year. I'm sure you can feel it. I can feel it. You can see it. I can see it. It kicked off in 2017, I think. There were actually lots of revelations in 2018. There were lots of 2019 and 2020 and in 2021 and in 2022 and 23. All of those years actually had significant UFO-related revelations. 2024 followed in that path. And, we may have to really get into the weeds and decide, like, where's 2024 compared with 2023 or 22? I don't know. But I think it's quite significant. And I think a lot of new information has come out, particularly in the public dimension of it all, not just to researchers. And then on top of the fact that we've got this weird mystery drone wave that is happening, and how long will that go? Well, we're going to have to find out and wait and see about that one as well. I gave my opinion earlier. I don't have a lot of confidence that we're going to get ultimate closure on these mystery drones. I could be wrong. Maybe we'll get something definite and we'll figure it out. Well, that would be great. I'm not holding my breath on that. This looks and feels to me, as far as I can tell, to other historical waves of still unexplained UFO sightings in the past. Just what it looks like to me. But if nothing else, you can't say that 2024 was a boring year. It was not a boring year. There's lots of stuff going on, lots to keep our attention on, commentators across the board. That's another thing. I mean, I didn't even mention this, but, back when I started doing UFO research 25, 30 years ago, the community was a lot smaller than it is now. So now you've got all kinds of people, particularly since 2017, who have been jumping in, and they are applying their research and their intelligence to this phenomenon. And we are seeing like it is a growing field. And I think there's a lot of great voices out there. Very glad that the field is as active as it is. And, it's got a different feel than it did back in the 1990s, and it should. You got people really taking it seriously and getting involved and getting into deep research. And that is another important reason why this is speeding up, because you got more and more people reporting on it. And I think that is entirely a wonderful development. And I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon either. So I expect 2025 to be an active year. One last reason that I think it promises to be active. I don't really know how important this is, but I have wondered for a long time that when you look at certain societies that are in the process of, let's say, political crisis, that at certain times, some of those political crises actually can and have in the past led to various types of UFO-related disclosures. So you go back, back in the history of China when Mao Zedong died, actually led to a lot of changes in that society. But one was UFO research actually went kind of crazy and started publishing a lot of information about Chinese UFO sightings. Yeah, regime change, that can happen. Spain, when Francisco Franco died in the 1970s, same thing happened there. In America, you had Watergate in the 70s as well. Kind of major political crisis that led to the Freedom of Information Act, strengthening of that act anyway, which then resulted in a massive release of previously classified UFO documents. Kind of shocking society at the time. And then, of course, maybe the biggest example would be the collapse of the Soviet Union in the late 1980s, early 90s, when that was a society that had just totally closed off information on UFOs, and then suddenly, whew, everything comes out. Massive amounts of sightings were made public during that period of time. And that was, again, a period of great political upheaval. We are now, I think, particularly in the Western world, looking at potentially something along those lines. May not turn out to be that way, or it may. But when you have a lot of unhappy people within a system, a government, it just seems to me that there's a lot of opportunities for certain people to talk more freely than they may have before. And I just wonder if that may be happening in American society today. I'm not sure, but I think it's a real possibility that that's going on, not to be overlooked. Food for thought. Well, that's it. I think it was, again, an interesting year. I'm glad to be able to share my thoughts about it with you. I'd love to know what you think. Was there a big story this year that I missed? Or if there is one that I covered here that you think was the number one, write it down below. I'll take a look. I always like to see what you have to say on the matter. And of course, as always, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, share the video. You know what to do. My website's at richarddolanmembers.com. I got a great community of people there. Lots of action. We have fun. And go check it out sometime as well. There's a lot of free content on that site. And that is it. Glad to be here with you. I wish you a happy new year and a great 2025. Yes, it's going to be a bumpy ride. We all know, not just in the UFO, UAP field, but the world in general. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But I want it to be a good year for you. That's it. Catch you all soon. Bye for now. Oh, and don't forget to keep fighting the good fight.